day-to-day scom operations. Okay, so we've got all the setup pieces done, and now we're really on to the fun part of using Operations Manager. We've got the clients plugged in, we've got the management packs plugged in, we've got our notifications set up and our management groups set up. And so really we can now begin our day-to-day operations of just using Operations Manager to help resolve the problems that are in our environment and to help us really know when those problems occur. Now the great thing about Operations Manager is that it not only lets us know reactively when a problem occurs, but because of the way it deeply monitors a lot of the services in your environment and how the people who build those services, whether it be a Microsoft tool like Exchange or SQL or a third-party tool, the people that build those can actually build in deep digging monitoring capabilities, monitoring integrations, so that before that service even fails, you can be notified and solve the problem in some cases before it even occurs. Now in this nugget we're going to talk about how you would use scom in a day-to-day operations sense. We're going to talk about how you're going to navigate that interface and how you're going to work through the interface to do what you need to do to be notified when things occur and resolve those notifications once you fix the problem. We're going to talk about the linkage between alerts and how the alerts affect your Health Explorer, which is something we haven't seen yet, and how that Health Explorer affects the Computers tab so you can see when computers are showing as healthy or showing as there's a problem there. And then we're going to go through the process of actually responding to and resolving some alerts that appear inside of our alert screen. Now that you have it set up, a lot of what you're going to be doing with it over the extended period of time is actually looking for those alerts and resolving them when they occur. Now what's interesting is that when you actually go through the process of working with the computer to resolve those alerts, sometimes you actually have to reboot the computer or do something to the computer that takes it out of its normal daily operations. And when you do that, you're going to enter that computer to something what's called maintenance mode. Now what maintenance mode does is it effectively shuts down Operations Manager's monitoring of that server for long enough that you can go and do the things you need to do so that it doesn't impact, or what you're doing doesn't impact your metrics associated with the uptime of that server or the quality of its services. We're going to show you how you can do some running tasks. Once you've identified that there's something wrong on a server, you can directly from the Operations Manager console run a number of tasks to actually either resolve the problem or figure out more about that problem. And also we'll talk about those overrides, which we've discussed a couple of times up to this point, which is the whole process of changing or tuning a little bit the management packs so you can eliminate some of the problems that may be popping up or the alerts that may be popping up that aren't really problems in your environment. Overrides are going to be a big thing for you whenever you get to the point where you get to management and daily operations, because you're going to want to tune those so you don't end up having these deluge of alerts all the time. And then lastly, we'll talk about the My Workspace node and also the web console once again, just so you have another idea of what your options are for providing things to the other administrators in your environment. Let's start by actually taking a look at the console again. And then again, for the first time ever, we're actually going to look at this console not from the perspective of, well, we'll get to that in a minute. This is now when we have the opportunity of actually looking at this monitoring console and showing how you're going to use that on a day-to-day basis. Again, as we see here, as we had before, we have our scom nugget server here, which appears to be healthy, and we have our dcnugget.nuggetlab.com, which, well, for some reason appears to be critical today. Well, that's interesting. Perhaps consider the situation where you've walked in the morning, and this is the first thing that occurred in the morning. You walk in, you sit down in front of your Operations Manager console, perhaps you don't have notifications turned on, and you find out that, wow, your domain controller is actually unhealthy today. Well, we need to figure out why. Now you'll see here under the Computers node that we have a number of different states for that computer, and we see critical here associated with the overall state of that computer. But if we scroll over to the right, you'll see that we have a number of elements where we're healthy and a number of elements where we're finding, well, perhaps we're critical, or perhaps we're seeing a warning associated with one of that elements. Now you'll see that I click down here on the critical node associated with Active Directory Domain Controller. Now that is actually showing as Active Directory Domain Controller as being critical because of an availability condition associated with that computer. What that means is not that there's a performance problem, not that there's a security problem, not that there's a configuration problem, but something associated with the availability or the future availability of that server is showing up as critical inside of this computer here. We can scroll to the right and see some other things that are not monitored, that particularly are monitored, for example, time service or essential services or sysvol. All of these elements appear to be healthy today, but there seem to be some things, something that's just really making this an unhappy server today. Now, there are a couple of ways that we can actually go and start tracing down to find out what the root cause is of this problem or this pre-failure warning here on this server today. One of the things we can do is actually go up to the active alerts node here and try to find where that server is and identify what the problem is associated with that server. You'll see down here we have some warning things down here, and then up here we have some severity critical things. You see we have a couple here related to DC Nugget that appear to be X's that show that it may be a bad situation. But we only have 2 computers in this environment right now, and if you have more than 2 computers, you may have a large number of alerts that you may have to parse through to figure out, well, exactly what's going on that server. Some alerts actually may even relate to that server's, how that server is behaving in comparison with other servers in the environment. And so looking at it from the alerts node may not give you a good idea initially of where that root cause is. Now, one way that you can actually go and identify that root cause relatively easily is by clicking on the server of interest, right-clicking on that server of interest, and then opening up what we call the Health Explorer. Now, the Health Explorer gives us a very nice rundown of all the different health-related elements that are on that server and what their status is, what their state is. You can see here it's in a tree format. And you'll see as we bring it open that the elements that are of interest to us are already made available to us as we drill down the tree. So we started at the top node and noticed that the entity health associated with dcnugget.nuggetlab.com is red. And that relates to availability. Now, all of the entity health nodes have, at the beginning, one of 4 different elements: availability, configuration, performance, and security. What these do is it allows us to break apart the different potential problems that could be happening on a server based in those four categories. Now, if we scroll down on availability, we see that the Windows Computer Role Health rollup is actually experiencing a problem. What this is it's a roll-up of all the different things that may be involved with a Windows computer. If I scroll down a little further, you'll see that the availability for DC Nugget actually is red, and that relates to the Active Directory Database Free Space Monitor and the Active Directory Log File Free Space Monitor. Now, you'll see as I'm clicking through here that the summary associated with that error message gives me a little bit of information about what might be causing this problem. As you can see here, if we didn't have Operations Manager installed, we may not necessarily be looking at, for example, the Active Directory database in its free space or the Active Directory log file in its free space to identify that there's an impending problem. But by having Operations Manager, which has its tendrils hooked into all different parts in our environment, we're getting a very, very deep analysis of situations that may occur. Now, this says here that the possible cause includes that the database size has grown through normal use of the directory, or that other files have been placed on this drive recently. So what we're thinking here is that perhaps the computer drive, the C drive for the database, where the database is stored on this domain controller, maybe that C drive is getting a little bit full. If I click over here on the second tab, I see state change events, which showed me at exactly what period of time that state actually changed from one area to the other. Now, when we actually did this, we did this at 9:54 a.m. and 11:13, and that state went from unmonitored to green, or good, that the database free space is okay. And then 1 minute later, we find out that it goes from green to red because that database free space actually has an error. Now, we see this because it takes a little bit for the monitor to actually turn on, and then for the monitor to turn on from green to identifying that there's a problem. What's great about this State Change Events tab is that it will actually show you when you have states that go back and forth. There are situations inside of certain troubleshooting aspects. Let's say when you're having particular problems on your server. There can be situations where the actual state of the server keeps flipping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between being good and bad. And so you may find that sometimes you look at it and it's green, sometimes you look at it and it's red. Well, what this State Change Events allows you to do is to identify how fast that state is changing and when that state is changing, and to help you then track down by date and time when that state changed and maybe to relate that to some other problem that may be occurring in your environment. Now, down here, you see that we also have a configuration situation that we've turned it from green to yellow, or a warning. And if we scroll down here, the yellow warning here relates to our service pack compliance. What this says here is that actually our service pack for the SQL Server is not at the latest service pack. According to Operations Manager, we do not have the latest service pack installed to this SQL Server, and so consequently, the SQL Server has a warning condition based on that. Now, we'll see here that that state change event had the same situation where it went from not monitored to green and green to yellow. We have a little bit of additional details down here about what's going on. So what this allows us to do is identify, well, perhaps we need to install a new service pack to this SQL Server to solve the problem on this computer. Or perhaps we need to add some additional space so that the log file can actually resolve itself. Both of these issues will allow DC Nugget to go from the failed state or the warning state back to the healthy state once again. My next step in this process is to actually go and resolve the problem. Now, resolving the problem may not necessarily have anything to do with Operations Manager, and if it doesn't, I may want to go ahead and after I resolve the problem, click this button here to recalculate the health of that monitor. If I've made some changes that require recalculating the health, it's actually going to go through and identify all of the different health states and figure out if any of those health states have changed. Now, if I've done some changes, for example, maybe I've updated the service pack while I was away, or maybe I've added disk space while I was away, once this process completes, these little red X's will switch back to green checks and we'll be happy again. Now remember, we haven't actually done this at this point. If we were to complete these little red X's would go to green check boxes, but we haven't done that at this point. What that button allows us to do is to recalculate the health and let the Operations Manager Health Explorer determine whether or not that server is once again healthy. Now there's a couple other things that we can have. If I go back here to the Active Alerts node, you'll see that I also have the option of just simply ignoring the message, or simply resolving the message, or even overriding that message if I feel that I need to. If I feel that I really just want to resolve that message, let's say that I've gone ahead and resolved the health service pack. I've fixed that service pack, and now I'm ready to go. You'll see down here on MS SQL Server here, Service Pack Compliance. If I'm complete and I've resolved this problem and I want to eliminate it from my list of noted problems, I can right-click on it and choose Set Resolution State. When I set that resolution state, I can set it to one of the resolution states that are available to me. In this case, I only have two because this is default out of the box and I haven't set any other alert states. I choose the closed resolution state, and that error actually goes away. Now remember, I haven't actually changed the service pack. So what I've done is I've told the alert to go away, but the next time it actually goes through its alert cycle to identify what problems are existing on the server, that alert will return. So I may end up just constantly seeing that alert, and if I keep resolving it, I just keep going through this loop over and over again. So there may be some situations where I want to perhaps maybe actually fix the problem. Let's talk about how I would actually go through that process of fixing the problem. Let me go back to my computers node here, and all right, well, I've hit the resolve button a couple of times, and now I just want to actually go and fix that problem, so I don't really have to worry about it anymore. I'm going to go and update that service pack on that domain controller. Now, of course, when I go and update that service pack on the domain controller, it's pretty likely that the service pack may actually involve a reboot of the computer, or it may involve a restart of the services, the SQL services, that are necessary in order to install that service pack. Now, when I actually go through that process, if I go through the process as normal, Operations Manager is going to look at that server and go, wait a minute, the services are going up and down, the machine's going up and down, and start popping up alerts associated with me working on that computer. Well, we don't want that. We don't want that to show up in our list of active alerts. So what we also have is the ability to enter a computer into what's called maintenance mode. Now, maintenance mode effectively turns off Operations Manager. It turns off the connections to that specific server related to my need to work on that server or do some maintenance on that server in order to resolve a problem. You'll see here that I can apply it to selected objects and all contained objects, for example, and then I choose a category associated with what I'm doing with that server. Now, you'll recognize these categories because these are similar to the categories you see when you try to shut down a Windows server. You can use these categories here. There are a number of different categories if you check the checkbox for planned outages as well. You can choose these categories if you want and select, for example, in this case, we're going to do an application maintenance event right here. In this case, I'm going to install SQL Server latest service pack. Now, in order for me to install that service pack, it's going to take me about 30 minutes to install that service pack. So if I choose the number of minutes here, that's going to change the number of minutes for 30, and if I hit the OK button, that's going to put that server into maintenance mode for a period of 30 minutes. At the end of 30 minutes, then it's going to come back out of maintenance mode and begin logging errors and events and alerts and all the things like it's known to do. You'll see here that we have the little wrench icon here, which lets me know that that server is in maintenance mode at this time. If I want to, I can go back to the maintenance mode here and either edit the maintenance mode settings or even stop maintenance mode on that server once I'm complete. What this allows me to do is, again, if I finish in less than 30 minutes, I want to get that server back on alerting so that I know if something bad goes on while I've been doing the work that I've been doing. So that's the maintenance mode capability for me. And I want to do this if I'm going to be performing some sort of work on that server, and I don't want Operations Manager to be alerted whenever that occurs. Now, there are going to be some cases when alerts actually pop up that I'm not particularly interested in. I just really don't care about them. And I can go and resolve them, but again, they're going to just come back. They're actually just going to return because, well, I haven't actually solved the problem, and the clients are going to continually come back and let me know that there's an issue. Now, in that case, I have the option of selecting what are called overrides. And there are a number of different ways that I can set overrides for a particular rule. I can either disable the rule, for example. So that means that any time that that situation occurs, any time that that behavior occurs associated with that rule, go ahead and disable it completely, meaning don't do anything. Don't alert me, don't notify me, don't do anything. When I choose to disable the rule, I can do that for a particular object, for all objects of the type health service, for a particular group of objects. Maybe I have a number of different servers that are having this error and I want to disable it across all of those servers, for a specific object of that type, or even for all objects of another type. It's very rich in which objects that I would want to actually disable that rule against. Disabling the rule, again, completely turns that rule off, completely eliminates its functionality whatsoever. There may be some other situations, though, where instead of actually disabling the rule, what I want to do is instead set an override for the rule. Let's say I've got another one up here. Performance module could not find a performance counter. I'm going to go down here and set an override for the rule instead of actually disabling the rule for this particular object, scom nugget. If I choose to override the rule, what it brings up is the override properties screen associated with the rule that has been created for the situation that's occurring. Now that's a lot of big words, but what it effectively says is that a condition has occurred. We have a rule that identifies what that condition is. And maybe in my environment, for example, we may have by default there's a performance rule that says if performance goes over 80% for a server, that server should alert as having a problem. Maybe I have a server in my environment where it constantly sits at 81% all the time. Now I don't necessarily want to disable the rule, because if I disable the rule, then when that server did go over maybe 90, 95%, or even 100%, I still want to be notified. But instead of disabling the rule, maybe I want to override that rule so that instead of saying 80%, maybe it says 85%. I can do that here inside of the override properties. Now this is sort of a tough example here because this isn't a performance-based one. What this says here is I can change, however, for example, the severity of this rule. The severity is currently set for 2. I could maybe change the severity to 3 if it was less important, or 1 if it's more important. I could go down here and change the priority and change that from 1 to 2 to reduce the importance of it. Or I can even change this Boolean value for determining whether or not we really care about it or not. You'll see that for each one of these potential errors that we have, for each one of these potential alerts that we have, they're going to have a number of different rules associated with that alert. If I go down here into overrides and override the rule for this other one, you're going to see a couple of different rules here. You'll see severity is 2 and priority is 2 by default. And so what this allows me to do is to change the parameters inside of my environment for when I consider something to be in a foul state or in a bad state. Again, I don't want to completely disable it, but my environment is just a little bit different than the environment that the person who wrote that management pack is assuming they need to alert on. And so when I do that, I can actually go ahead and choose to override it and choose to enforce that even over additional overrides. And then down here, I need to choose a selected destination management pack. Now, these rules have to go somewhere. These rule overrides have to go somewhere. And because we've imported in these sealed management packs that cannot be changed because they've been hashed and turned into a binary form, I can't actually change the rule because they're sealed. In order to change that rule, I essentially create a new management pack for those rule overrides to go into. Now those can either go into the default management pack, or they can go into this other management pack called the Client Monitoring Overrides management pack. And that's up to you. You're going to have to make an architectural decision on your part for determining what sort of management pack you want to create, or if you want to use one of those 2 default management packs for actually including in the rule overrides. Again, you have to have a separate management pack for them because, again, those management packs that the rules were created in are sealed and cannot be changed. Alternatively, you can actually create a new management pack associated with those rule changes. If you wanted to distribute out which management packs actually had the overrides, perhaps by server or environment or owner or whatever you want to do, you could do that by creating separate management packs for those rule overrides. Now in our case, we could just override the rule here and change the value if we wanted to, and set that to the Client Monitoring Overrides management pack. At the point that we actually hit apply, that will actually change that rule and will change how we get alerted based on that rule when it occurs again in the future. I'm going to go ahead and close this down without saving it. Once I've gone ahead and changed the override here, I may then want to go back and set the resolution state for that to closed so that I know that I don't have to worry about that rule anymore. Now, another thing that I may want to do as part of my troubleshooting process is I'm trying to resolve the situations that are going on. I might see that, oh, scom nugget here is having a problem. It's got some computer verification, some module error that's going on in its system right now. Well, maybe I might want to go find out, maybe I want to do an IP config on scom nugget to figure out what its IP characteristics are. Maybe that's one of the techniques I would use to troubleshoot why I'm seeing the error that I'm seeing. You remember that I went here to the view menu and closed the actions menu a long time ago. And again, the only reason why I closed that actions menu was to provide additional space so we could see what we were doing. Now, the actions menu has some really nice things that we can do here versus in terms of alert actions and also in terms of health service tasks. Some of the tasks that I might want to do to help me troubleshoot this problem is checking the health service configuration or looking at computer management for that server or disable or enabling audit collection or pinging that computer or maybe even doing an IP config, just like we said. What I'm going to do is search down here and try to find, IP config isn't in here. So what I want to do is search down here and perhaps ping that computer to see if there's maybe something going wrong with that computer. Let me go ahead and do that now. Let me go ahead and choose ping computer here. And once I click ping computer, it's going to bring forward the console task output and show me what the results of that ping are going to be. You'll see here that by pinging the computer, I'm getting a typical response that I'm used to seeing as well. I can click the close button here. Any one of these options I can choose as my process for going through the troubleshooting steps that I would want to do. So maybe I don't necessarily need to go to that computer to resolve the problem. Maybe I can troubleshoot the problem here locally from my console and actually speed up my resolution of the problem. A little later on in a later nugget, we're going to talk about how you can create your own custom tasks in here that you can use to automatically kick off resolutions whenever problems occur. Now you can, when we create these custom tasks, you can create them so that they automatically resolve whenever they automatically kick off whenever an alert occurs, or that they're available to you under this list of health service tasks for you to do manually whenever you see a problem. But these tasks are available to you so that you can actually quickly resolve problems without having to necessarily go and log into the server and poke around in the server and look at the event log and look at computer management from having to walk across to where your data center is to resolve that problem. Another set of things that you may consider doing, maybe not necessarily in the troubleshooting process, but in the planning process, or at least in the daily care and feeding process of your servers, is actually looking at some of the performance characteristics of those servers. Now, if you're like me, you may love perfmon. I love perfmon, because perfmon provides all of that useful performance information about my server that helps me understand what its performance today was in comparison with its performance yesterday. The problem with perfmon, however, is that it's sort of a pain in the neck to work with, because all the perfmon files are separate. They're file-based. They're not database-based. If you reboot the computer, it creates different perfmon files that aren't interconnected, for example. Well, Operations Manager takes a lot of the pain, actually, out of working with perfmon files. I'm going to close the Actions pane here and show you how this works. Here under this monitoring pane, we've sort of skipped over some of these folders that we see here down on the bottom. Let's take a look at Microsoft Windows Server, for example. You'll see that under Windows Server, I have a couple of different views that I can look at that show me information about that server, or the servers that relate to Microsoft Windows Server here. If I click on Logical Disk State, you'll see that the computers that I have available to me that correspond to being Microsoft Windows servers now, I have information about those servers. You'll see here scom nugget has a C drive, and DC nugget has a C and an E drive. We see that DC nugget is still under maintenance mode, so it's not currently being monitored. If I scroll to the right, I can look at the characteristics of that C drive or E drive associated with the device description, the file system, and even the space that's available for that. I can even go down and look at operating system performance information here. You'll see that I have a number of perfmon statistics that I can look at here related to, for example, processor free time, page file percent usage, for example. I can add that into my little graph. If I scroll down here, I can look at memory percent usage, for example. It shows me all of the various information that I would normally have to go to perfmon to do, but I can do that here inside of Operations Manager. What's great about it is that not only can I look at this data over a small amount of time, I can look at this data over a larger amount of time and look at historical information about this data as well. You'll see here that now we've got 12 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 4 a.m. and 12 a.m. But if I want, I can actually change the scope as necessary by right-clicking in the graph and choosing to select time range. You'll see here that now I have a time range of a single day, but I can select specific start and end times as necessary to go backwards in time as far as I have data for. So this allows me a little bit better visibility into my servers and how they look over an extended period of time. You'll see down here I've got more information about health monitoring, disk health, network adapter health, various things that let me know that indeed some of the elements on my server are healthy. I can go down here and view performance and see performance about disk capacity or memory utilization or network adapter information, again, associated with those Microsoft servers in my environment. And so what this provides me is a more proactive look at the status of the health of my servers in my environment. Your goal as the person who's in charge of the daily care and feeding of your servers is to take a look at these statistics on a regular basis to make sure that the servers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. You can then look back and correlate the alerts that you see with some of the performance statistics that you're also seeing, so that you don't have to then be looking in the dark associated with when you might be seeing problems on those servers. All of the information is gathered by the Operations Manager agents and provided for you in a single location. Now you are actually the Operations Manager Administrator, and so all of this extra stuff in here is something that you're probably going to be aware of because you're going to be working with it on a daily basis. But there may be situations where you want to actually create some custom settings that maybe tailor out some specific information. You know, having to drill down through all of these nodes can be challenging if you're trying to find just the specific information that you're looking for. That's what the My Workspace area is for down here. What My Workspace allows you to do is create special areas, maybe alert views or event views or state views or performance views or diagram views or even dashboards, for example, that allow you to tailor in just specific alerts or specific events that you're interested in seeing. Maybe you might create a separate view that just has to do with alerts that relate to all the SQL servers in your environment, or alerts that relate to specific resolution states, or alerts that relate to specific severities, for example. And what this allows you to do is sort of filter through all of the extra stuff. Even though the management packs have filtered data for you, it allows you to filter even further to get down to just the information that is valuable to you. All of these filterings occur here by right-clicking and choosing New, and then choosing Alert View or Event View or State View. What they'll do is populate in with your workspace so you can actually have your own workspace full of your own custom filters that you're interested in looking at. Now, what's great about My Workspace is that those characteristics actually go back into the web console as well. This is the web console that we talked about a few nuggets ago, and how you can deploy this web console out to other people in your organization if you don't want to give them full access to the console itself. Now, this web console has a lot of the stuff that you see inside of the regular console, but is limited to just the monitoring nodes and that My Workspace node. And so what's great about this is it allows you the same kind of flexibility for opening tasks and setting resolution state on tasks and even entering servers into maintenance mode, but you're not going to have the authoring pains. You're not going to have the administration pain. You're not going to have all of that high-level stuff. You're just going to have the stuff that someone who is working on the servers in their environment needs to know in order to make sure that they're healthy over a course of time. And so the web console is a great little tool to provide to people if you want to give them just a very specifically tailored down approach to working with Operations Manager. As you'll see here, while we were talking about that, the Operations Manager web console will automatically update itself from periodically to bring new information as new information arrives. So that's the web console too. So that's what have we talked about in this nugget? We've talked about all the things that you're going to do in your day-to-day operations as an operations manager administrator, and also the things that maybe your help desk and your server teams are going to be doing whenever they're working with operations manager as well. A little later on, we're going to talk about how you can secure down and lock down those consoles if you want to provide full consoles, so that users will only be, by the role that you've assigned them, able to do specific things inside of that console. Maybe one user shouldn't have the ability to resolve errors. Maybe another user should have more access to add in servers as necessary. We'll do that in a little bit later, so you can even further tailor down your SCOM operations. We've also talked in this nugget about navigating the interface and that linkage between alerts and how alerts drive the Health Explorer and how the Health Explorer drives the health state in the computers area. We talked about how to respond to and resolve alerts, including the putting computers into maintenance mode as necessary, or even running tasks as necessary. And we've talked about how overrides are necessary because you need to tailor down and tune down those management packs because they may not be specific for how your particular environment works. And the last one, we talked about My Workspace and the web console, so you can get rid of all the extra stuff and really work with just the data that you need in your day-to-day operations. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.